Welcome back to the Adapter to the Brush. If you saw the last video, you saw me producing some weathering powders. I said I'd have to mop the surface down afterwards. That, I hope, gives some idea of the amount of pigment dust produced. That was just wiping down this desk from this last video. Anyway, on to today's video. What I want to talk about in this video is how to use masking and the various different types of masking techniques there are. So what I've got today are 3 door panels that I've already partially painted. They've been sprayed with Tamiya iron oxide and then given a bit of a stipple with some lead belcher just to give a bit of a shine on them. So we've got a bit of a mottled surface to start with. And the first thing I've got is frog tape. Now this stuff tears up relatively easy. Rip it into little bits to get a rough edge. It sticks very, very well, but I find that unless there's a real issue with the surface, I don't get any paint bleeding with it, and I don't tend to find that it tears paint off. I've not really encountered any issues using an airbrush. It might peel off some of the lighter layers that have been applied from a distance, but certainly if you're applying anything by brush, it certainly doesn't affect it, and it certainly allows you to use an airbrush or whatever tool you'd like, paintbrush, sponge afterwards, without any problems. You can also do other things with it. It comes, just to give you an idea, it comes in a large roll, found in most DIY stores in the UK. It comes in various colours. I go with the yellow for its anti-bleed properties, but you can tear sections off relatively easy. The other thing you can do with it is actually lay it down and cut shapes out of it. So if you wanted to cut a complex shape, you could cut symbols out of it or whatever. That was just using a relatively dull hobby knife, but you can see you can get some quite decent shapes from it. I'm not going to use it to do that much. I'm just going to show you how the coverage is with this. It's also good for wrapping models to spray with rattle can if you've already painted part of it. If you want to paint up part of the model in a different colour and you've not got it in sub-assemblies, you can use frog tape in combination with the next one that I'm going to talk about, which is Maskol. I tend to use the Humbrol. I've not used the Vallejo product at all, but I do tend to get through quite a large quantity of this. It is supposedly water soluble, but I wouldn't use your brushes with it. It will absolutely mess up any paintbrush that goes near it. So I would only reserve using your worst paintbrushes that you're about to throw in the bin to use this with. The things that I tend to use more often is torn up bits of sponge, or if I'm trying to be precise, I use silicone colour shapers, because the Maskol, although it will stick to it, it rolls off it, doesn't damage the silicone at all. So it's the easiest way to apply it and remove it. So how are we going to apply this? This stuff is rather thick and gunky, but I've got it on a cutting mat that I don't mind using, so I'm just going to tip a small quantity of this out when it comes out. Ooh, live on video, folks. It shows you how much we use at once. I'll have to try and clear some of that up. But take your sponge, just dab it into it, sponge it off so you haven't got too much on it, otherwise you just get large spatters, and take your surface and just dab away. Now, depending on how much damage you want to have showing, the more of the Maskol you want to apply. As this stuff does dry, it will start to stick and react with the surface that you've already applied Maskol to. So if you've already applied a lot of Maskol and it's already dried, you will start to find difficulties with applying Maskol without it being peeled back off by the sponge with more Maskol on it, because it will stick to itself. But hopefully you can see that I've dabbed sufficient on there to start covering up the bottom of this door panel. So I'm just going to put the sponge to one side, show you how I can use this colour shaper. Just make sure I've got no particles on it to start with. Same approach, colour shaper in, and because it gives you a little bit more precision, you can jab it into the corners on small panels, get it into the creases and into the crevices, so that when you finally got it filled in, it's not affecting too much of the surface around the hole that you're trying to fill with masking material. And because the colour shapers or the silicone shapers have got some flex, they will allow you to wiggle the masking material around, and at the moment I've just filled those little spaces on that panel. Now in the meantime I'm going to try and scoop up some of this mess. Live clean up on camera. What else am I going to use? Palette knife. See how much of this I can get back into the jar. I may have just wasted a large volume of this. But as long as the surface you're using this on is not absorbent, you're in luck, because this stuff, once it is dry, turns into elastic bands basically, and you can just roll it up. Hopefully I've not wasted too much of this. Given the amount that I use, I don't really want to waste that much of this. Not really adequate on the clean up, but just spread it out. Why don't you? As this stuff starts to dry, it does start to thicken, which you might see when I do this. Capturing the door panel. A little bit more, we're nearly done. There you go, clean up on camera. So that's Maskol. Now there are a couple of other things that you can use, that people do use for painting models. Next one we're going to try is salt chipping. Now I'm going to tend to use this around the edges because I'd rather have this looking more distressed, and I'm actually going to blend this into the masking tape. I have some impact there as well. Let's see how this looks when finished. Just take some salt. Tend to use a mixture of coarse salt and rock salt. Give a variety of different size particles. Tap it off. Leave it to dry. Once it's dry, you can paint over it. Probably best using a rattle can or an airbrush, or if you've got a very, very large makeup brush that's not too wet, you can probably get away with painting over salt. But I would tend to use an airbrush or a rattle can for painting over salt chipping. Sweep this mess up. clear this up better between the next video. But the last one, this is the one I haven't tried before. I've heard people talk about this. I thought I'd show you live on camera. What I've got in here is a mixture of water and a relatively gentle toothpaste. I've gone for a children's 0 to 2 year old milk teeth toothpaste because it will be the least abrasive. And what I'm going to do is just mix it up with a tiny amount of water to make it into a slightly thickened paste. Again, this is another one that will have to be allowed to cure off somewhat before I paint over it. I'm probably not going to paint over it with a brush. I will probably spray Avalon Sunset yellow from a rattle can rather than relying on an airbrush. I do have one, but it's not something I rely on. I tend to prefer painting by brush. So once I've got it to a slurry that's smooth, haven't got too many lumps in it, I can now switch out to a much smaller normal paintbrush. I'm not going to use one of my really decent ones, but I will use a much older brush that I'm not too worried about using once I find one. It's not a brilliant brush, it's an old brush, but I should be able to dip it into this toothpaste mix and actually paint with it. So what I'm going to try and do, so that you can see it on camera, is literally paint this toothpaste slurry over the Imperial Eagle and the winged skull on this door. Now, there will probably be a bit of overlap and a bit of correction that needs to be done, because I've not used my finest brush, and I've done this for use on camera, so I've not got this under my magnifying glass, so I'm not really seeing it with the best light, because unfortunately I am getting old and I am losing my sight. But right, I've got enough of that toothpaste slurry over there, just push that off the edge there. Hopefully when that dries we can paint over it. So now what we need to do is we need to wait and let those dry, and once they're dry we can paint over them. But I'm going to just experiment a little bit and try the same thing with the toothpaste that we did with the Maskol earlier, and just dab it at the bottom of the door. Because it's different medium, it won't mix with the Maskol. So hopefully there's enough toothpaste dabbed down and it's not too uniform. And now I can leave that to dry. And once that's dry, I'll paint over it. The very last thing I'm going to do they do put child seals on these Maskol bottles, which for children like me, especially old children, makes it difficult. So this time, again, with the silicone sculpting tool, and come back just at the edge of this masking tape, just to show you that you can use these in combination with each other, rather than you wasting a whole load of Maskol on a large panelled surface. You can use the masking tape to give you most of the coverage and just come in at the end with the Maskol and apply it next to the tape to change the appearance of your outline. Unfortunately, I think that Maskol has gone quite sticky and solid. That's a different jar I've just cracked. There we go. I've broken the outline up a bit better there. You can see it's starting to go rubbery. And what I mean by it goes rubbery, you can literally just peel it off the colour shaper, and the colour shaper is completely clean again, and you'll have a little rubber nugget. Again, don't use it near carpet, you won't get it out, it will stain, you get shouted at, you'll end up having to cut it out your carpet. Right, back from having sprayed them, didn't use Avalon Sunset in the end, I've run out of that, ended up using Sunset Yellow by Colourforge. So now that we've sprayed them yellow, you can see the salt chipping's already starting to come away on this one. What I said about trying to paint over the top of them, I use really large makeup brushes if I'm going to work over weathering powders or if I'm going to work over masking materials, purely because I don't want to kick the masking material up. So that I tend to go for as large a makeup brush as I can, because I want to disturb the surface as little as possible while still being able to apply pigment to it. So what I'm going to do is start off with some Avalon Sunset, get my brush wet, just so it's got a bit of moisture in it. Don't want it to have more than a hint of wetness to it, and rather than applying that to the palette, I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush to get a little bit of the yellow. I don't want a lot, I don't want to overdo this. Just get a bit of yellow onto the brush, and I'm going to try and gently stipple some of this Avalon Sunset onto the raised areas of the panel. And because I'm using such a light brush, hopefully I'm not going to disturb that masking that I've put down already. And this way you can get a highlight on before you try and remove that masking. It saves some time in some ways because you don't have to be so precise. The masking material will take away itself when you remove it and leave the bits that you've highlighted that aren't covered in Maskol highlighted. So you still get your gradation in your highlight. You can see there is a bit of kicking up going on. Maybe need a little bit more colour. Just don't want to overdo the brush. And as it dries, you come back in and repeat the process, and you can build it up with a lighter and lighter coat. I'm going to try and do this a little bit slapdash. Too much pigment now. Should either better do it lightly where I've got some salt chipping, and also not too aggressive. This way I'll catch the higher points. Yes, it's starting to disturb the salt. It's not what I wanted. I will have to go and cleanse the waters in a moment. Take a different brush for this one. what I'm going to do is mix a bit of Dawn Yellow into this, just to give a slightly lighter shade, more buttery colour, that I can then wash over at a later date. I'm not going to change the brush out at all, or the pigment on the brush. Same process. And I'm not trying to be perfect with this, I'm just trying to show you what I mean. Trying to stay away from where I've already kicked the salt off, so that I don't disturb over there and don't put down a colour that I haven't got in that area. But I'm going to call, just trying to get some in there. I'm going to call that done. Now that brush is going to need a thorough wash afterwards. I'm going to leave those to dry, and once they're dry we're going to come back and peel that masking off. Those are now thoroughly dried, so now what we're going to do is remove this masking. So the first thing I'm going to take off is the tape, because it'll be the easiest to take off, and it will lift up the Maskol that's already there. Hopefully you can see just how sharp the lines you can get from the Maskol are, and we'll come back and show how that could be useful in another video at a later date. Now we've got to get rid of that salt, so I'm going to take a different brush at another size and literally attack it with some water, and because it's salt it will just dissolve away. So everywhere there's salt, the salt will dissolve, and therefore there won't be anything for the paint to adhere to, so it will just come away with the salt. So you just work it with a brush, and you'll find that anywhere that the salt adhered to, the paint will come away, leaving your base colour behind untouched. I think we had a bit of the liquid Maskol there. Get some on the panel. And yes, you will get a puddle forming from doing this, and you may have to attack it for quite some time to get all of the salt away, especially if you've applied quite a thick coat from a rattle can or an airbrush. I would suggest, if you're doing this with an airbrush, you do need to be careful of the layers that you've put down. If they're too thin and powdery, they may just brush away as you're trying to take the salt away from the surface. I'm just going to dunk it to the end of it, try and flood the surface. Just going to dab it dry so you can see what it looks like complete, and clear up that little bit of mess that we've made over there. So just dab it down with a bit of tissue paper, and hopefully you can see the type of effect that we've got off of that. That was salt chipping, some masking tape, and a bit of Maskol on the edges there. Hopefully you can see the kind of effect that we've got. You can then wash over this with other colours at a later date to improve the vibrancy and saturation that you've got, even improve the quality of the metal and the rust. I tend to have run a sepia wash over this, or used one of the yellow contrasts over the yellow first, try not to get it too much on the metallics, and then highlight it or wash the metallics with some Agrax Earthshade or something afterwards. So that's that one. The next one was the one that we used the toothpaste at the top and the Maskol at the bottom. For this I'm going to use the colour shaper that we used earlier to attack the surface. The reason I do this is if you use a brush for this, you tend to end up wrecking the brush. A colour shaper will take this to a certain degree and is far more effective than having to use some kind of brush or bristle to work away at this. I have got older brushes that I do use for this purpose, but for this video I'm showing you how I would best go about doing this, ideally, rather than trying to knacker up old brushes. So you can see that the colour shaper is actually abrading the Maskol. Because they're both rubberized and rubbery, and the Maskol will slip because it's an elastic, it will start to peel away, and you will get to a certain point, especially where it's at its thickest, where you can actually get hold of it with a nail and pull it off, and you'll get this stretchy sort of rubber band material, which is the dried Maskol coming away. And you will tend to find many of these little boogers, as I call them, stuck around parts of the model, so you will need to be careful going around clearing them out of all the cracks and crevices before you paint, because they will show up in the final product unless you clean them out very, very effectively. So for the purposes of this video and what you're going to see of this, I think that's clean enough. I'd probably give it a better clean if it was for myself and for a model that I was making. But for the video, that's good enough. Now, this is where we've got the thicker piece of toothpaste at the top. So I haven't tried this before, but I'm going to try and attempt to attack it with a brush and some water, because the toothpaste is supposed to be water soluble, and hopefully, yeah, it's already starting to loosen. The toothpaste will loosen and dissolve in the water that we're applying, much like the salt would, but in a far more precise manner. So hopefully, as I attack this, it's going to come away from what I've painted it on the wings. I might need a stiffer brush, I don't know. I'm trying to be as gentle as I can, because if I'd already painted this surface, I wouldn't want to damage the paint job I'd already put down. We'll see how we go. Just needed a little time for the water to soften it. I think just having to be patient with it. Yes, it foams up like toothpaste, so it's probably helping to actually clean itself off, which I hope doesn't mean it's attacked the other paint elsewhere. What we shall see in a minute. I'm going to try and take some more of that off. Right, that looks like that got the final piece of it off. check it from a different angle if I can. Might have just been my application method wasn't too precise. Seems to have a bit sticking at the bottom here, so I might need to be a bit more aggressive. I'll come back and paint it later. Right, if that'll wipe down, get rid of that mess over there. Just going to give this a shake in the pot, dab it off and see how we look. Right, thinking, looking at it, it may well have just been my lack of precision in applying the toothpaste. Hopefully that's clear on the video, but toothpaste has definitely come off from that winged eagle. It's probably my lack of precision in applying it that was more the issue. That's why the outline's somewhat rough, so I'll probably come back in and correct that. Yeah, a little bit more Arvalon Sunset around the edges just to neaten it up. Probably wouldn't be a problem, but hopefully you can see the effect that I'm talking about, distressing your doors. So that's show more than just a little bit of chipping damage on your vehicles. The last one, we put some Maskol in the recesses and we put the toothpaste on the door. So I'm going to attack these first with the silicone sculpting tool, try and get those mobilized. Now when you've got stuff jammed in crevices like this and they start to become problematic to get out, that's when I'd switch over to using a pair of needle nose tweezers or something, just so you can grab hold of the little bits of it or scratch the surface as little as possible so that you can obtain the bit of set Maskol that's in that recess. So that's one that's doing it. Let's show you how we get those out, where we'll put those. Sorry, I'm just looking for where I've hidden my tweezers away. That's a pair that'll do. So it's just about pulling them out of the recesses. They'll come away relatively straightforward. Yes, they will need some cleanup afterwards. There will be little bits of paint flakes. I would just take a large stiff brush to the model afterwards just to give it a brush down, just to make sure that I haven't got any more residues hanging around anywhere and that I've got those out. So that just gets those little bits out of there for the moment. Now what I need to do is attack this bottom corner where again we use some toothpaste. And hopefully this will look not too dissimilar to what the Maskol did on the other door panel, but we shall see. It'll probably take a few seconds to start to loosen because it's got to get water through that paint layer to the toothpaste that was underneath before it starts to mobilise. So now that the panel has started to allow water to ingress underneath it, it should start to speed up because we've already cracked that surface. Just being a bit more aggressive with it now. think we're almost done, folks. We're almost there. Right, I'm going to call that one there. Dab it off. I'm going to give it a little rinse just because it's small enough. Unless I was too precious about the model, I might go and run it under a tap or something, but dab off. Let's try it. Let's see how we look. Alright, there we go, folks. I hope they look quite satisfactory. I'll try and take a photograph and put up either on the end screen or on Instagram, but I hope that shows you how you can use masking materials to get a quick effect that looks quite successful. You can put washes and various other products over the top of them and they look quite effective. Thank you. I've been the Adept of the Brush. If you like what you've seen today, please like and subscribe. It'll help the channel grow. Thank you and goodbye.